Today I'm interviewing Jeff Melcher, who's one of our dealers and a longtime friend, and he's a coach and a racer and everything you'd want. And he has a business called Cycling, Form, and Fitness. And tell us a little bit about it, Jeff. How are you doing and everything?
Doing good. Cycling, Form, and Fitness has been in business for 12 years now. I started doing time trialing. That was my first interest. And that led me down the path to want to learn more about what John Cobb was doing. So I became a student of what John Cobb wrote and what you put out there for videos. And then I had the luxury of being able to come visit you in Texas. And that was a great trip to learn more about hands-on and bike fitting. During that same process, I got certified by Bike Fit. So I understood a lot about the shoe interface and the things they teach you at Bike Fit, but that's not quite the same as doing a triathlon fit or doing a TT fit. So I'm going to thank John for really helping me get further along the path of doing that and servicing my customers well. So I do primarily work with triathletes at this point. So a lot of tri bikes, but they have road bikes too, of course. So I get a fair amount of road bikes.
Well, great. I get the big head here thinking that I help somebody, so that's pretty good. But it's fun. I've been doing bike fitting for a long time, and we're always learning. Everybody's always learning because the technology changes and the equipment changes and the racing changes, and the the coaching seems to really be helping people focus on different areas and that kind of stuff. But just as a short side trip, I'd like to kind of get your opinion on the value of a coach, and not just being a coach, but do you think it's important for the coach to be able to really be a racer? He doesn't have to be a winning Ironman racer, but somebody that actually enters and goes out and does some racing? Or does it matter that the coach is just a smart person and really understands recovery and motivation and that kind of stuff? Because motivating your clients, that's the battle most of the time. And so your resume is great because you can give us a quick list, but you're a national champion in several things, a big Xterra racer and everything. And so you certainly have the credentials. And so what's your view on that?
Yeah, I do think it's beneficial to have been there and done it. I think that gives your guidance a little bit more legitimacy. But I also think there's highly educated people that can do this too. My pathway has been do it myself first and then teach others. And now that I'm in my 50s, it's a little bit different, right? So some of the people I coach are also in that demographic. And so they're doing it to complete just as much as compete. So I got a few athletes going both directions, and the same thing with Bike Fit. You can have someone come in with their tri bike and they're more on that complete side of their Ironman, or you can have some people that want to still go fast and try to get the best time possible. So It's good to serve both sides of it.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of my view. As I've gotten older, I'm still racing, and I've had a pretty good year, but it just turns out as you get to be in your late 60s and 70s, you remember how to do things back when you were 40 and 50, you just can't do them anymore. And so there's always the outliers who are 70 or 75 that still do Ironman races, but it's a shorter list of people. Whereas it turns out a lot of my friends do sprint races now, and they're all happy with that. But for the young people coming up, I encourage them. I said, I know everybody talks about Ironman, but don't just give up on short local races. That's how you learn to be fast on transitions, and how you learn to suffer through on the bike or run faster and work on that, because the clock doesn't care where the time comes from. And so you have to work on all aspects of it.
I agree 100%. So I always think of sprint and Olympic distance first. Then a lot of my athletes gravitate towards 70.3, but we'll still sprinkle in some sprint and Olympic races, or we'll do practice sessions, because to your point, you got to sharpen up your transitions and your run, bike, swim.
Yeah. Well, I think because you're in a different part of the country, you're in the north and see a lot more races. Plus you travel, you go to Utah and New Mexico and all these places for doing Xterra races, but you see different trends in cycling. So kind of, there's different fitters have different kind of theories that they like to operate on positioning, and particularly on tri-bikes. Right now, all the rage is to, have your hands way up in your face and everything. Whereas I'm a little hesitant to do that for an age group triathlete, because age groupers just, they see the pictures and they want to look like that, but they just don't have the core strength and all to do that. But in the last few years, I've been really setting riders up more and more aggressive, more forward than I ever dreamed I'd do. And it seems to be working for me. So I was just going to get your thoughts and let you talk about what you see at the races right now, and what your customers are telling you for feedback when you do fittings.
Yeah, whether it's right run or indifferent, I haven't been pushed my customers to the praying mantis position or hands high. I've been experimenting a little bit more on my bike fit, but I find it to be uncomfortable. And so it's back to that point. It's like, can they hold it for the distance? If you can't hold that position, say you're doing 56 miles, it doesn't work for you. And I think it does take some flexibility. I think you can train yourself into it, but we talk about that, people getting more flexible and training themselves into a position, but I usually don't see it happen. So I'd rather start with relatively level arms to maybe 10 degrees up. I find that works well. And I've read some information about aerodynamics and how really the praying mantis, you need to be pushing speeds and powers like the pros do to have it be beneficial, because of the yaw angles and how that plays into it. So you see like Jan Frodeno, he's got relatively level arms. And I think that can work for a lot of people.
Well, I agree with that completely. Back when I used to do a lot of wind tunnel stuff, we would always try, hands up. And I'm not just saying it's bad, it's just that as a average over the yaw curve, for an age grouper who's really going 17 or 18 miles an hour, the crosswinds can flow through so much better. You're actually putting a smaller frontal area picture up for the winds to not have to react with. So I've kind of been hesitant to push people in there unless they're really fast. Now, for a state time trial guy, that's a different story. We're going to do everything to make them look like an arrow out there. But that's the biggest thing is, as a coach, you got two sides here. You're a fitter and a coach. Well, you've got to get your athlete trained up from a core strength standpoint. And, as a seat manufacturer, we sit here and go, well, I happen to know that I've only gone to, a few hundred triathlons, and you go out to about mile 30 at Ironman and everybody's up on their aero bars getting over the swim and everything. Well, it doesn't take but just a few miles sitting up on your brake hoods to offset all the gain you're going to get out of anything else. So, lecturing your athletes about core strength and all is a real big deal. And then in fitting, of course, I've been preaching a lot about short cranks and the values of those, and how that can help you with your run and all. What are you finding in those areas?
Yeah, so personally, I came into John with 175 cranks, and I was a TT guy. And we had the bike that was too big. So my speed concept was too big, and this is 5-6 years ago. So I went with shorter cranks, and John gave me that advice, and I have never looked back. And now I'm very confident installing shorter cranks with a lot of people. I tend to see women, 5'7", 5'8", and shorter, and they're trying to push a 170 crank, and it just doesn't make sense. They're getting locked up on that, upper extent of the pedaling stroke. Their knees are into their diaphragm, and it's just, you can't get them into a good bike fit position. So I tend to, if a client will pay the money, I can guarantee them the shorter cranks will work. Right. And it works. And I'll tell them, I'll take it off and put your old crank back in if you need to, and, a few weeks down the road. I never have anyone come back.
Well, that's exactly what we see here. It's just people can't get over. They say, well, somebody said I'll lose leverage, I'll lose blah, blah, blah. And I go, I'm telling you, all you're going to like is that you're going to turn more RPM for less effort, and you don't have to eat as many energy bars to go the same distance. And it's a good day. And so we're finding that. Now, let's talk a little bit about seat position and fore-aft seat position and what you're finding for athletes now And I'd like to go into both road and tri, if you don't mind, because on road bikes, I'm personally doing even more aggressive positions than I've ever done. Because down here, I mean, it's a little bit hilly here, but people are just riding faster. And so I'm just, really slamming the front ends and moving them forward and getting them up over the cranks more. So what are you finding? And I think you had a PowerPoint thing you'd showed me at one time. If you can play that, maybe that we can talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll bring that up. So what I see too, I see both on the road side and on the tri side that I need to get them forward and up in their seat position. So I think you can see my presentation now.
Yeah, this is real nice. People can read through this and that'll be good for them. And then we can discuss some of your graphics as we go along. That'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, really my mission is to get my customers to be comfortably faster on their bikes.
Yeah.
As we've talked about, that could be bike fit equipment and of course the race preparation. As I go through this, you'll see a little bit more of my background, but it's all about working with people and putting smiles on their faces at the end of the day.
Right.
So I like to think customer centric and making sure that the customer is always going to leave happy. And hopefully I can continue to make them happy by working with them in a coaching realm. I'm both a certified bike fit pro USA triathlon coach and Ironman certified coach. So my basic ideas are we got to have the correct form that's sustainable. We need the fitness to be able to do that well. And then there's skill development. Tri bike, it might seem like it's relatively low skill, but to hold a position and ride with confidence and not waste energy, you do need to have those skills.
Yeah, no, and I think that's an often overlooked thing because so many people, they'll do a shorter race, which might have a turnaround in the middle of the road, and they have to get off their bikes and pick it up and do a little roach thing where you turn your bike around, go the other way. And they just need to go out to a parking lot and learn to handle their bike better. And that's an important aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely. And transition clinics, whether you're doing a flying mount or a careful mount, you got to kind of pick and stick because you don't want to be trying anything new on race day, that's for sure.
Yeah, right.
And then I have to get the pedaling interface correct. But once I do that, I'm moving on to bike fit, just the basics of getting the body position on the bike. And not every rider is the same. So here's someone that's got a relatively upright position, has some bars that they put on their standard road bike. And I don't like this type of bike fit myself because I feel like a standard road bike shouldn't be made into a tri bike, but you do what you can with the customer and what they have to work with.
Well, that's true. And when you go to the races, it's so predominant to see road bikes with aero bars on them. As you go to longer races like half Ironmans and Ironmans, then you see more and more, higher percentage of tri bikes. But when you're at the start out of a sprint and Olympic races, that's the setup you see. And I just walked through and I can't actually complain because this season I raced on a Colnago road bike with a reverse seat post and a long stem on it, just because I had the bike and I didn't want to go buy a new tri bike. And so it worked okay. And I didn't get, it wasn't as stable as I'd like it to be going down some of the fast hills, but it was okay. And, but it's a common problem. And it's real hard now with the bikes having the different kind of seat posts and all to get into a better position because you can't always reverse the seat post. So on a lot of our seats, like our Type 5 and the Delta M series seats, I've extended the seat rails a little bit more so that we have more options to go further forward without worrying about things like reverse seat posts and things like that.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. You get someone that's trying to get that a little bit more forward seat position on their road bike, and if you run all rail, it's game over. So a big part of bike fitting is making sure I got a good saddle that's going to work for them for the long haul and that I can get far enough forward. Because to your point, here's a triathlete and he's a really great age grouper that I work with. And you just have to get that hip forward and over the pedals and over the cranks. And here's another guy that's 6'2", but run 165 millimeter cranks. So, that was one of those things that we spec'd new with his bike. A lot of times I'll go shorter, but he wanted to run a Shimano crank, and this was a few years ago, so that's what we did for Chris.
Right.
But again, much more, call it aerodynamic or aggressive position, torso angle of 12 degrees, shorter cranks, like we said. He runs a Cobb saddle, of course, just off the front 55 back in the day.
Uh-huh.
And of course, he's got more of the arms down, the Jan Frodeno look of bike fit. But Chris was very successful with this, and he did very good at local and races around the country.
Well, and that's the important thing. You know, you just want your customers to go out and race well. They may not win every race, but they want to come back and go, you know, I had a really great race. I got off the bike and I ran good. And that's the key, because it's, you know, you win the races on the run. And so you want them to come off the bike and not feel like the bike held them back, whether it's the saddle sores or numbness or the cranks or whatever it is. You want them to really feel good about it off the bike.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've seen as a trend is exactly what you're saying, running the shorter cranks. So this is a photo of myself. It wasn't the final picture of the bike fit, but it was one of the ones in process. So what I like to do is do a 90 degree angle to get a nice vertical line from the bound bracket.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm measuring that hip pivot from the bound bracket as John taught me. And I'm trying to keep that in between 25 to 75 millimeters. This is 54 millimeters. And I just find that position with shorter cranks and, you know, sitting on the tip of that saddle, a Type 5 saddle for this one, it's just a great position. I can put 90% of my people on there that are relatively fit, and they do good with this for 56 miles or 112 miles.
Well, that's a great picture, and it really explains kind of the way I think on bikes right now. Is that you would really, I tell people when I'm fitting them, I said, when you're right, you ought to close your eyes and feel like the lower half of your body's running. You ought to just be using your upper body for running up hills and just have that feeling on the bike, because then you're going to get off and run well. And I think that's a good way to do that seat measurement as far as straight up from the center line of the crank to their hip point. And I like the way you do that. That's a good way to do that, actually. And so I think you're on the right track there.
Yeah, this was just, you can see kind of a before and after, but I was able to do just some minor tweaks and get my pelvis to rotate into the saddle better.
Right.
You can see how my head position went down from 74 to 58 millimeters.
Uh-huh.
So again, you can just see how the minor tweaks can put us into a better position.
Right. And then, you know, in the wind tunnel, you can verify that real quick, but that can show up as 2-3 minutes on a, you know, 56-mile bike ride. So that's a good value. And I think your hand height's real good there. And so that's a good area to look into. Now, I've got a few athletes who have, you know, different torso length in that they have a specifically short upper leg versus their lower leg length. In those cases, we're going forward, and I'm going to where their hip socket is just straight up over the crank axle. And I used to always think that kind of hurt your hill climbing ability, but really it just turns out that you just have to deal with the hills, and you're faster on the straight lines because, as you say, the seats will let you rotate forward more. And even our Delta series seats, like our Delta P and the M and even our V-Flow, which are, you know, narrow rear seat, they'll let you roll your hips forward more to get a flatter back. And so the athletes have to really learn to roll into that and, you know, drop your bars more, and it works out pretty well.
Yeah, and one thing I had to consider too is frame size. I think this is a Quintana Roo, and it's a 54 centimeter. And that's the way they classify it. It would seem insane for people to think 5'11" on a 54, but this is a perfect fit as far as I'm concerned. And again, I just did this at Ohio 70.3, and I had a good run off the bike, and it's a good sustainable position.
Mm-hmm. So when you're coaching someone and they come in and they say, you know, coach, I'm just not running fast. What can I do? Well, do you relate that back sometimes to bike position, or do you think it's mostly a hip flexor problem, or you just have to get on the treadmill and learn to move your feet faster? Where do you go with that?
Yeah, I think it could be all of the above. I tend to look at their Training Peaks history if they've kept it. If not, I have to go by their diary or what they have to tell me, of course. But if they're given running the right time, I want to look at bike fit next, because if we don't get them far forward and on the right length crank, they're probably never going to run good off the bike. And I hate to see an obstacle like that. So even if I'm doing coaching someone from afar, we could still do this video and we could do it over Zoom. And at least we can get them in the correct position 95%. And I hate to see that be the reason that they're just not running good off the bike.
Well, I tell people all the time, I said, the old racing thing, whether it's cars or boats or airplanes or bicycles, speed costs money. And when you make the commitment to do anything more than just show up for a local race and do it that day and have fun and eat hot dogs afterwards, if it's anything more than that, then you got to really commit. And I know, everybody says, well, I've got a family. I can't commit with so much money. I can't buy a new bike. Yeah, but you can buy cranks, because you can buy running shoes, and you can, get a seat that's comfortable so that you can train more, because if your seat hurts so bad, you can't train, you're not helping yourself. For short women, I think cranks are super important because of things like toe overlap, where the front wheel hits their feet going around corners. Those things are really important. So that's why I tell people going in, I said, it's not that you got to go buy a new car, but you do have to step up on your equipment to get your performance gains.
Yeah, I can agree with you more. And bike fit being number one, crank length being the important part, and the right seat. And I'm happy that Jacob has a good line of seats. I can get someone comfortable on one of the 10 options that I have each and every time.
Yeah, it's it's always work in progress, and that's why I really appreciate feedback from people like yourself who are out in the field racing. Because I value it, and if my seats work for me for my size and the kind of racing I do, and generally they work pretty well, but we're always thinking of ways to improve and get better. So feedback from your customers through you to me is always very valuable, and I appreciate that.
It's great. It's a two-way street. I guess this is an interesting picture, because this is that pedaling over the top, where if you get too tight in the knee angle and the hip angle,
right,
you just aren't going to be able to breathe. And again, if someone's a little thicker, they might not be able to be as aggressive, but the short cranks are a big part of that. It can really help get the thighs out of the diaphragm and make a fit that maybe couldn't work with long cranks, actually work with short cranks.
Yeah, and that picture is really pretty representative of those problems. And you can go with cleat placement and things like that, because the problem with cleat placement, a lot of times people come in with hot spots on their feet, and they're trying to solve that when really they may have an insole problem, or just the screws are too long through their cleats or anything like that. But cleat placement can really affect performance. And so a lot of people have tried mid cleat, or we'll have customers that are having Achilles problems or plantar fasciitis, and so we'll move cleats to try to help some of that. But from a straight performance standpoint, I like to go kind of more forward with the cleats. And so, what's your findings on that?
Yeah, I agree. For the first time, I had a customer that was just getting toe numbness, and I moved the cleats all the way back, and no benefit. She went to wider shoes, no benefit, and she had the Ironman Wisconsin coming up. So I did the midfoot cleat placement. I bought some of those adapters that you can get from Switzerland, actually,
Right.
And I was finally able to get the cleat to be truly midfoot. And she did Ironman Wisconsin, and she was the happiest person on the planet. She just had no toe numbness whatsoever.
Well, that's great. And a lot of times that's what I tell people. This is the value of a coach that's interactive and who's out racing and understands the bike. I've always said, if you're going to get a swim coach and he's not with you, walking up down the deck, then you don't really have a swim coach. You've got to be involved. And that's why I think it's so great that you are out with your customers and do bike fits and be involved with them as they go through their journey. I think that's real good.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you saying that. If we're ready to close the book, at least for this conversation on the tri-bike fit, I do have a couple photos of my road bike fit. I'm just using my pictures as the example, but again, some pretty basic rules. My seat is pretty far forward here. Whether it's right or wrong, I tend to look at where the seat tube goes, and I find that if I'm a little bit forward of the seat tube, that gets to be a pretty good place. I mean, here's another place where I could adapt a distance from the vertical off the bound bracket. What are your feelings on that, John? Do you think it's worth putting a measurement compared to the bound bracket? Or do you use anything like this idea of how you align with the seat tube?
I'll just have to confess that on my personal bike, I do everything from knee over pedal to see, how that falls, to looking down through my handlebars and seeing where the front hub is, which is the oldest way on the earth to pick out positions. And then I just go by power. And since so many people have power meters now, going by power is really the better way. But if you on this picture were in my shop right now, I would do a couple of things. I would take all the spacers out from underneath your handlebar stem. I would put on a negative 35-degree drop stem out to about a 120, and that'll help you roll forward more, because where you are right there in this picture with your hands on your drops is about where your hands ought to be on your brake hoods, except for you need to be extended forward a little bit more. And then get your seat forward more. And so if this particular bike has a round seat tube, so you'd be able to, reverse it and do all that. But I would say that if your standard tri-bike setback from the center line to your hip pivot point was 2.5 centimeters, then I would go to try to get to around 5 centimeters for a road bike.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I do a 0 setback seat pull. That's what I have here. I'm running the Type R, the Randy saddle.
Right.
And that helps me get some of that, pelvis rotation into the saddle and have long-term comfort. And then I'm also running a cob crank now. I switched that out after the bike fit. So I have your cob crank and I'm doing a 165. And I think my position has moved a little bit more forward. This was a pretty early video I did, but I knew it would be good for the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And like I said, there's road fitting. Tri-bike fitting is one whole different segment, but for a road bike, where you say, well, where should my knee be over the pedal when my pedal's at 90 degrees? Well, for me, I like my knee to be just ahead of the pedal axle. And, like the fit systems from Dan Enfield at Slow Twitch, they just guffaw at that and go strictly by, angles. But you can get those angles in so many ways. But I believe in rotating the rider's body more, which brings in, better hip flexors and better glutes and uses your upper body for building power more. And so I don't care what level the rider is, it's hard for humans to build a lot of extra power. And that's why I came out with my narrow seats a long time ago. It frees up your hamstrings and your sciatic nerves and all that, so that you can drive into the cranks better. And so that's what I like to set my riders up as. And all these numbers that you have here are perfect, other than I would extend your stem out, to 120 or 130, whatever you can get that's longer and lower, and then work on, rotating your pelvis more.
Yeah, it's a good point. I do have a cob dropper stem on this, but I still have some of the spacers that I could take on and make that lower. So that's an easy thing for us to swap. I mean, that's the great thing. If you're close and you got a drop stem like this, you can just take spacers out and try to go lower.
Right. And I wish I had my bike here to show you what I've got, because I'm running a Randy seat. I'm using a negative 35-degree stem. I'm running 20 something centimeters of drop. It's crazy, and people look at it and just go, "What are you riding?" I go, I was having huge problems with hand numbness. My two end fingers on my left hand would just go numb in 2 minutes on a bike ride. So I built all kind of carbon fiber inserts, and I was going to come out with a whole glove line that fixed all this. And it still didn't really fix it. After about 45 minutes or an hour on the bike, my hand still was going numb. And so I'm sitting there one day and I go, I preach to people all day about slamming this front end, and they all love it and blah, blah. So I just came in and did it to my bike. And if you're kind of halfway in shape, it's just great. It just looks crazy. And for the first time you get on it, you just go, man, my nose is dragging on the front tire. But I'm telling you, when you go ride it, the bike handles so good. It turns so fast. It just goes. And I really like it. And so now I'm even more encouraged, and my hand numbness is gone. I just don't have the problem anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll try that for tonight. We have a nice group ride coming up just later this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and drop my handlebars a little bit more and give it a go tonight. You don't know unless you try,
don't be
right?
afraid. I mean, go for it as far as you can go.
Yeah, sounds great.
Well, I think this has been a really good opportunity for people to see, the presentation with the angles and all that. And I think that you're doing a great service for the people up in your area. And we always appreciate your support on our products and everything. Like I said, I've known you for a while, and you just do good stuff for the sport. And I think that's important. So I really appreciate you coming on with us today and being willing to talk to us about it.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate you being a mentor. It's a privilege to have you as far as just giving me help as I go through this. I had to learn from something, and I started that 10 years ago, but you really helped fine tune my skill set.
Well, I'm always glad to help any way I can. And, that's just what makes the hobby better, is that, everybody ultimately will help each other. And that's what's nice about triathlons. And you're out swimming and running, and people always talk to you about nutrition or whatever. And all of it matters. And so we're very appreciative to have guys like you out there with us.
Thank you.